The fluorescent lights above me buzzed at a frequency that made my skull feel like a tuning fork. Everything smelled like antiseptic and cold plastic. A nurse leaned over my face, badge swinging on its lanyard. "Daphne, stay with me. Can you tell me your last name?" I tried to answer. The words dissolved somewhere between my brain and my mouth. 48 hours earlier, I had been piping rosette borders onto a 5-tier anniversary cake in my parents' kitchen, thinking the hardest part of the weekend would be keeping my mother from crying during the toasts. I grew up in Brenham, Texas, where the summers last 9 months and everyone within 20 miles knows your grandmother's maiden name. My family ran Callaway Cakes, not my real last name, but Grandma Flo's maiden name, which she'd built into something before I was born. 3 bakery storefronts across Washington County, wholesale contracts with 4 hotel chains in Houston, custom cake orders that came in 6 months ahead. By the time I was 11, I was measuring flour beside her on Saturday mornings, learning which humidity levels required extra butterfat in the buttercream, which clients needed a phone call versus an email. Grandma Flo had hands that moved like they'd been baking since before the earth cooled. Maybe they had. My brother Holden was 7 then. He thought the KitchenAid mixer was a carnival ride. My father, stocky, slow to compliment, quick to delegate, ran the business operations. My mother handled catering relationships and kept the social calendar full. They were a unit, efficient, warm in public, transactional at home. The way they divided tasks, I always understood my role without being told. I was the one who handled things. Holden was the one things were handled for. At 13, I started doing the wholesale invoicing after school because our accounts manager had knee surgery and my father couldn't make the numbers behave. I found 2 billing errors inside the first week. My father nodded, said good eye, and never hired the accounts manager back. I kept doing the invoices for free because family. Holden at 13 discovered his passion was eating, not baking. He ate his way through 3 years of high school lunch specials, developed opinions about craft beer before he was legally allowed to drink it, and talked about the food industry, the way other kids talked about being famous. My parents lit up when he spoke. Visionary, my mother called him. The next great restaurateur, ahead of his time. My father sat me down in the bakery office 2 weeks before my high school graduation. The ceiling fan wobbled. I remember watching it wobble. He folded his hands on the desk the way he did when he'd already made a decision and was informing me of it. "Your brother's applying to culinary school in San Antonio," he said. "Johnson in Wales has a program." I waited. "Tuition is $38,000 a year." I waited. "You've got your community college fund. You're staying local anyway, so the gap is manageable." I looked at him for a long moment. The gap. First-year tuition. We'll cover what we can from the business. But cash flow is tight with the Katy franchise expansion. My community college fund was $11,000. I had saved it from 3 years of weekend catering shifts and a summer job at the Dairy Queen on Highway 290. I had planned to use it to avoid student loans. I was going to study accounting at Blinn College. I'd already registered. I transferred the money before Holden's orientation week. I don't know why I did it. That's the part people find hard to understand, and I find hard to explain even now. It wasn't that I didn't know it was wrong. It was that the alternative, watching my parents' disappointment calcify into something permanent, being labeled the one who wouldn't, felt worse at 18 than losing $11,000. I had been trained for it so gradually I didn't recognize the shape until I was already inside it. I took out a student loan, worked the bakery counter Friday nights and Sunday mornings, got my associates in accounting in 2.5 years. My name was in the graduation program. My parents came. My mother took one photo on her phone and posted it with the caption, "So proud of all our kids." Holden was in San Antonio learning knife skills. His second year, he joined a professional networking club that cost $4,000 in annual dues. My father emailed me a screenshot of the invoice with no message, just the attachment. I paid it from my tax return. His third year, he studied abroad in Barcelona for a semester. Housing and flights came to $9,000. My mother called it a formative investment. I called the bank and confirmed the wire. By 23, I was managing full-time bookkeeping for all three Callaway Cakes locations, earning a salary my father had set in 2019 and never adjusted for inflation, and paying off my student loan in chunks whenever I had extra. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Brenham, drove a 2014 Honda Civic with a dent above the rear wheel well, and brought my own lunch because Austin lunch prices felt criminal on my income. Holden graduated with a culinary degree and immediately began telling people he was going to open a craft brewery. Not a restaurant, a brewery. I didn't ask what happened to the food industry passion. I just noted the pivot. He moved back into my parents' house at 24. My mother set up his old room with a new desk and a mini fridge. She said he needed time to develop his concept. He spent 8 months developing his concept while I processed payroll for 16 bakery employees and filed quarterly sales tax returns. Then he met investors, or he met men who said they were interested in investing, which is different. A venture group out of Austin took 2 meetings with him, asked for a detailed business plan, and went quiet for 6 weeks. Holden told my father they were in final discussions. My father started talking about the Callaway name being on the taproom sign. My mother ordered custom business cards for Holden that said founder and head brewer. The investors passed. I learned this not from Holden, but from accidentally overhearing my parents in the bakery office, with the door cracked. He needs a lead investor to anchor around, my father was saying. Someone with credibility. What about Daphne's situation? My mother said. A pause. The ceiling fan was wobbling again. It was always wobbling. She turns 30 in 8 months, my father said. That's when the trust becomes accessible. I went very still in the hallway. I hadn't known the trust was there. I knew Grandma Flo had passed 4 years earlier and left something, but the family conversation had always been vague. An account, some assets, nothing specific. My father handled the estate. I went home that night and dug through my email until I found a letter I'd received from a law firm 18 months after Grandma Flo died. I'd skimmed it then, because I was in the middle of annual inventory audits. I read it properly for the first time at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, sitting on my kitchen floor. The Florence Mabel Hayward Revocable Trust, established 1992, principal assets, patent royalties from commercial bread proofing and dough tempering equipment licensed to industrial bakeries in North America and Europe. Current valuation, $6.2 million. Beneficiary, Daphne Grace Hayward, granddaughter, upon her 30th birthday, provided she meets the independence criterion, defined as 4 or more consecutive years of self-funded housing and living expenses without family subsidy, verified by audit. I read the independence criterion 3 times. I met it. I had been meeting it since I was 22, without knowing I was being observed, without knowing there was anything to meet. There was a handwritten note scanned into the attachment. Grandma Flo's handwriting, which I would have recognized in my sleep. Daphne never once asked me for money. She asked me how to get better at things. There is a difference. This is hers alone. I sat on the kitchen floor for a long time. I called the law firm the next morning. The attorney, Mr. Keene, answered on the second ring, calm and unhurried, like he'd been expecting me for a while. He confirmed everything. He also confirmed that my parents had contacted his office twice in the preceding year, once asking about early access provisions, and once asking whether a power of attorney could be established before the trust activated. Both times he had said no. I thanked him and hung up. Then I went to work and processed payroll like any other Wednesday. The anniversary party was my mother's idea, as most large events in our family were. 30 years of marriage, 200 guests. The Lone Star Event Center in Brenham, with the wraparound porch and the string lights over the parking lot. Catered, obviously, by the bakery, lobster mac and cheese, because my mother had seen it at a wedding in 2019 and never forgotten it. Live music, a photo booth. I baked the anniversary cake myself. 5 tiers, vanilla almond fondant exterior in my parents' wedding colors. It took 14 hours across 2 evenings. I drove it to the venue in the back of my Civic with the seats folded down, seat belted to a sheet of non-slip foam. When I carried it in, my mother photographed it immediately for her Facebook and did not say thank you. I found this out later, but the document was already on a side table when guests started arriving. I noticed it only when my father guided me toward it before dinner. A single sheet, formal header, power of attorney, irrevocable, full financial authority transferred to my parents, effective immediately upon signing. He had a pen in his breast pocket. I read it twice. I set it back down. I'm not signing that, I said. My father's face didn't change exactly, but something behind it did. It streamlines the tax structure when the trust activates. Harold Fletcher, he started, and then caught himself. He'd used the wrong name, Mr. Keene's name. The firm recommends it. Mr. Keene told me last week that no such recommendation exists, I said. The dinner went fine. I smiled through the salad course and the entree and the first round of toasts. I watched my mother work the room and my father shake hands with the Chamber of Commerce men he'd known for decades. I watched Holden, in a sport coat that still had the fold lines from being in a bag, circling the bar. The cake cutting was supposed to happen at 8:30. At 8:15, Holden picked up the wireless microphone the DJ had left on the edge of the stage. I saw it happen in slow motion, the way you see things when part of your brain already knows what's coming. He tapped the mic twice. Feedback squealed. 200 people turned toward the stage. My mother, across the room, smiled and began moving forward. My father stepped up beside the cake table with a clear view of me. "Before we cut this beautiful cake," Holden said, his voice carrying out through the string lights and over the parking lot, "I want to make a family announcement." He looked directly at me. "My sister Daphne is going to fund the launch of Callaway Brewing with $750,000 from her trust fund. We're officially moving forward." The applause started before anyone fully processed the sentence. The kind of polite reflex applause that happens at announcements before the room catches up. Then the applause thinned and people started looking around, trying to identify me. My father stepped toward me. He had the power of attorney in his hand. He had carried it to the party in his jacket pocket. He held it out with the pen. My mother appeared at my other side. "People are watching," she said. Her smile was perfectly in place. "Don't make this a scene." Daphne. Holden was still on the stage. 200 faces were still turned toward us. "It's a fair deal. Your name on the tap room. Equity share." I looked at my father's face. I looked at the pen. I looked at the document I had already read and understood. "No," I said, not loudly, just clearly. Holden stepped off the stage. He moved fast, faster than I expected from someone who'd been at the bar since 6. He grabbed my arm first, then my shoulder when I pulled back, and when he shoved me, it wasn't a small shove. Both hands. My heels caught the edge of the hardwood riser where the cake table was elevated, and I went backward hard. The back of my head connected with the marble edge of the buffet table. The sound it made was wrong. Not loud, just wrong. The next thing I was aware of was the floor against my cheek and a warmth spreading down the back of my neck that I knew before I touched it was blood. Someone was screaming. Multiple people. I could hear my mother's voice saying, "She's fine, give her space." And I remember thinking that was a strange thing to say about a person lying on the floor, in a pool of blood at a party. The ER at St. Joseph's in Bryan smelled like every ER. Floor cleaner and latex gloves and someone's bad night. They gave me 14 stitches in the back of my skull and a diagnosis of mild concussion with soft tissue damage. 2 cracked ribs where I'd hit the riser on the way down. The doctor said I was lucky the marble hadn't caught me at a different angle. My parents arrived in the waiting room. I know, because the nurse told me. I told the nurse I was not ready for visitors. She nodded and went back out. I don't know how long they waited before they left. I didn't ask. Mr. Keene arrived at 8 the next morning. He was 60-something, methodical, wearing a gray suit that had been pressed within the last 24 hours. He set a leather portfolio on the tray table beside my bed and sat down without being asked, the way someone sits when they've already decided what they're going to say and aren't in a rush to say it. "I saw the incident on video," he said. 3 separate guests uploaded it before midnight. He opened the portfolio. Inside were documents I hadn't seen before, pages of exhibits, bank statements, a forensic accounting report dated 4 months earlier. "Your grandmother commissioned this report in 2019, he said. The year before she died. She had noticed irregularities in the royalty disbursements going back to the mid-90s. He turned the portfolio toward me. The patents Grandma Flo held on her bread-proofing technology had been licensed to commercial bakery equipment manufacturers since 1992. The royalties were structured to pay quarterly into the trust. According to the forensic report, beginning in 1997, 60% of those royalties had been quietly redirected, not to the trust but to a family LLC called CH Enterprises. The LLC had 2 members, my father and my mother. Over 25 years, the diverted amount totaled just under $4 million. It had funded the Katy franchise expansion. It had funded Holden's Culinary School. It had funded a lake house in Marble Falls that I had been to twice and always assumed was mortgaged. The amendment authorizing the redirect was dated 1997, Mr. Keene said. The signature on it does not match your grandmother's. A handwriting analyst put the discrepancy probability at 94%. I looked at the ceiling. There was a water stain above the window that looked vaguely like a rabbit. "She knew," I said. "She suspected. She built the independent verification requirement into your trust clause specifically so you couldn't be pressured into signing anything before she was ready to release the evidence. She told me she needed time to compile documentation she was certain would hold up." He paused. "She died before the report was finalized. I completed it on her behalf. A week after I was discharged, my parents filed for emergency guardianship. The petition alleged that the head injury had resulted in cognitive impairment, affecting my financial judgment. A psychological evaluation, performed by a doctor I had never met, dated 5 days after described me as exhibiting delusional resistance to reasonable family financial planning. I sat in the courthouse hallway in a gray blazer I'd bought 3 years ago for an audit presentation and read the petition twice. 14 stitches and 2 cracked ribs, and someone I'd never met had called it cognitive impairment. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling that hadn't been updated since the 90s. Judge Halpert presided, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain. My parents sat at the petitioner's table with their attorney, a man in a too-tight suit who kept straightening his tie. Holden was absent. His bail conditions prohibited contact. My parents' attorney opened with a prepared statement about my erratic behavior and emotional instability following years of financial mismanagement. He described my refusal to sign the power of attorney as evidence of impaired judgment. He did not describe the incident that put me in the ER. Mr. Keene objected on 3 separate grounds before the attorney finished his second paragraph. Judge Halpert sustained 2 of them. When Mr. Keene presented the forensic report, my father gripped the table edge. When the bank statements appeared on the courtroom display, line by line, year by year, $4 million redirected over 25 years. My mother pressed her hand to her mouth. Her attorney tried 3 separate objections. All 3 were overruled. My father took the stand. He called the redirected funds administrative restructuring and said my grandmother had verbally approved the arrangement. Is there a written record of that approval? Judge Halpert asked. We communicated informally, my father said. Is there any record at all? A pause. No. Judge Halpert looked at him over her reading glasses for a moment. Then she looked at the documents in front of her. The guardianship petition was denied with prejudice. The matter was referred to the state attorney's office and the IRS for investigation of potential trust fraud. The order came down 15 minutes after Mr. Keene finished his closing statement. My father sat very still when the gavel came down. The way someone sits when they have been running a long time and their legs have just stopped working. My mother cried in the hallway, not quietly. The sound echoed off the wood paneling. Outside, it was one of those sharp October days in Texas when the air actually has an edge to it, rare enough that you notice. Mr. Keene walked me to his car. He said Phase 1 the way someone says it who has already drafted the paperwork for Phase 2. I thought about Grandma Flo in her kitchen, flour on her forearms, watching me measure vanilla extract with the precision of a pharmacist, teaching me to proof dough by feel, not by timer, telling me once, without a lot of fanfare, that the people who built things understood timing in a way that the people who only wanted things never would. She had been watching me my entire life. She had just been very quiet about it. The next 6 months moved in that particular way time moves, when consequences are arriving in sequence, not all at once. The state attorney's investigation became public in February. My father's wholesale contracts with the Houston hotel chains terminated before spring, citing vendor reputational concerns. 2 of the 3 bakery locations closed by summer. The 3rd was sold at a price that barely covered the outstanding debt. The lake house in Marble Falls sold at auction. I saw the listing online by accident, scrolling through real estate sites at midnight because I couldn't sleep. It sold for less than my parents had paid for it in 2003. My mother moved into a 2-bedroom rental in College Station. I know because she sent me a change of address card in a plain white envelope. No note, just the new address in her handwriting. Holden's Brewery never opened. The investors who had been in final discussions learned about the court proceedings and withdrew. He took a job driving a food delivery van for a restaurant supply company in Austin. I know this because someone from our hometown sent me a screenshot of his LinkedIn update with a comment that said, "Wow." I didn't respond. My father called once, from a number I didn't recognize. He left a voicemail. He said he wanted to explain the context. I listened to it once, standing in my kitchen, then deleted it. There was nothing in it that hadn't already been documented in a courtroom under oath. I filed the legal name change quietly in January. Daphne Hayward, my grandmother's name. The clerk at the county office, handed back my paperwork with the stamp on it, and said congratulations in the tone people use when they're being polite about not understanding the significance of what just happened. That was fine. I understood it. Mr. Keene structured a disbursement schedule that allowed me to leave the bakery bookkeeping contract, which I had continued through the legal proceedings because the employees still needed their paychecks processed, and none of this was their fault. I gave 4 weeks' notice in writing. My last payroll run was on a Friday afternoon. I saved the file, closed my laptop, and sat for a minute in the silence of my apartment. Then I opened a new document and started drafting the framework for the Hayward First Gen Fund. The scholarship is structured for women who are the first in their family to pursue a 4-year business or accounting degree, specifically at Texas colleges and universities, because Grandma Flo was a Texas woman and would have wanted it close. Full tuition and a laptop. 8 recipients in the first cohort, selected in March. I attended the orientation event on a Saturday morning and sat in the back of the room while each of them stood up and introduced herself. One of them, 20 years old, from a small town outside Waco, had been doing her family's tax returns since she was 16 because no one else would. Said she had applied 14 times for financial aid before finding this one. She held the acceptance letter with both hands. I thought about a girl at a bakery counter measuring a vanilla extract at 11 years old, learning by repetition what nobody was going to explain. I didn't make a speech. I said, my grandmother built the systems that made the money. I just tried to build something with it that she would have recognized. After the orientation, I drove back through Brenham on the way home. Out of habit more than anything, I passed the original Callaway Cakes location on Market Street. The sign was still there, or the bracket for it was. The sign itself had been taken down, and someone had taped a paper for Lee's notice to the inside of the front window. The display where Grandma Flo used to put the special occasion cakes was empty. I didn't stop, I kept driving. Some people hear how it ended and call it a happy ending. They're not wrong, but that's not exactly the frame I use. A happy ending implies the possibility of a version where none of it happened, where I grew up in a family that knew the difference between a person and a resource. That version doesn't exist in the past. What I have instead is what's in front of me. That's enough, it has to be, and it is. Walking away from people who treated you like a piggy bank is not something you do gracefully or all at once. But you do it, and then one morning you wake up and the only account that matters is the one with your name on it. Just your name, and you realize that for the first time in your adult life, you are the only person with the combination.